Hello and welcome to Who Corner to Corner podcast. My name is Geoff. I don't know why I did that.
That was good.
And his name,
and his name is Paul. Hi, everybody.
Do you know, that reminds me of.
My name is Geoff. I'm pointing at me because I need to reaffirm my identity by pointing with double fingers right at me. There is that what it is? Is that
no?
You've got a bit of
it's
a crisis going on
in The Office when David Brent says to Martin Freeman's character, he goes, "In a few years."
Yeah,
this could be you. He goes.
Oh, you're pulling that one from the dim and distant past. It's been a long time since I watched The Office, mate.
Yeah,
very good fun.
So yeah, we're back, like Backstreet Boys. No, I don't know.
Don't go there.
So we're in celebration of the season 9 The Collection release. Hold on.
Ta-da!
If you're listening, you can't see this, but if you're watching...
There it is, out this week, ladies and gentlemen, and mine is still wrapped up, and it's still got its delivery note dispatch sticker on the back. Look at that. Thank you, Amazon, for giving me that pleasure. Admittedly, it will come off with the cellophane, but nonetheless, great packaging, mates.
Well, as a side note, you know, that was shipped to Paul, not in a Amazon card.
Not even in a box, not even in a cardboard box I can reuse. For when I send it back to them in disgust, but nonetheless, it is.
Slapped the delivery label on it, and the postie could have gone, "Oh, this is nice.
I'll have this
I didn't manage to get my I didn't get my copy. Yeah. I'll take
rinse
this."
It on eBay.
Or it could get trashed in delivery.
Indeed.
So poor show Amazon.
But there it is, pride of place next to my James Bond stuff there.
Absolutely, yeah. So the season, the collections are massive, aren't they? And I haven't had a chance to go through any of season 9 yet.
An entire classic Doctor Who season in lots of lovely discs with lots of lovely packaging and all that sort of stuff.
Now, if you're listening or watching and you get the collection sets, and chances are you probably do, you'll agree with us, I'm sure, that they are absolutely incredible. I mean, like, for me, I'm a sucker for a nice presentation box.
I love it.
You know, whether it's
great on the shelf.
A CD release that comes in a nice box, or Blu-ray with a slipcase or whatever. But these things are, they're awesome. The book type thing, the Photoshop work on the inside, but then of course the contents on it all as well. I mean, I'll be honest, there is more stuff on them than I have possibly got the time to watch, listen to, or read
in one go.
So
right?
No.
Total.
Ever.
Oh, mate.
I only end up with a small window of time of an evening to watch, or whatever.
Do you know what? I think you're right there, actually, because when they first started coming out, I consumed all of it. That first Tom Baker, what was it, series? Was it series 13? 12, whichever one it was, Tom Baker's first series.
I can't remember.
And I watched it. I watched it all within about 4 weeks. I limited myself an hour or so a day. So that's all the stories, all the special features, all the interviews, and everything else that goes with it. And they are immense. And do you know what? They, because we spoke to Chris Chapman, who makes quite a lot of the documentaries for these. And what was really clear from speaking to him is that everybody who contributes to creating these loves what they do. It is so far and beyond the level that would be expected for this kind of thing. It really is.
Well, yeah. I mean, for any show, really. I mean, as we know, and I think we spoke to Chris about this, most stuff that comes out now on its home release doesn't have any VAM.
VAM, that's the word he used. VAM.
Like, I buy the Marvel films, and you might get a couple of 2 to 3 minute, featurettes that you've seen on YouTube on there, and there's no decent making of or anything like that. Although, I will say they put them on Disney Plus under the Assemble name, and they're very good on there. But they're not on the discs, and almost everything you buy now, you might get a couple of bloopers or little featurette or something, but there's nothing special. And I'm just going to get it in right now.
Go on.
The home release for Avatar has got over 3 hours of making of stuff. and that's brilliant. I knew Cameron.
He'd come up trumps, would he? Well, we've got True Lies coming out as well, haven't we? Which is long overdue.
The Abyss. Yeah, they're all coming out.
Looking forward to those.
But multiple hours of behind the scenes stuff. The last decent, a Blu-ray I purchased like that was Alita, which had 2 hours or something on it, with a really good making of. So I like that sort of stuff,
same.
and as I'm sure many other fans do. So these collection sets just going like insanely kind of deep
over
on
the top
stuff
in some ways, isn't it?
In some way, could they ever beat these unless they created 3D holographic immersive projection versions in the future?
When they squirt them directly into our heads, Geoff. So excuse me a minute, I'm getting tangled up with my wires here, and I need wireless headphones. Go on, you carry on.
I'll carry on. And there's so much stuff on it, and some of it is, of course, is old things from the DVD range that they've kind of polished up again. But there's a lot of brand new stuff, whether it's behind the sofa chats with people, or some of the new documentaries that Chris Chapman and team have been working on, and they get the show's stars. Katie Manning's done a load of them. Actually, as a side note, I did see that she tweeted that this would be her last collection release, which of course it makes sense, doesn't it? Because all the Third Doctor stuff is out now. So that was quite sad, because Katie's done so much with it and been brilliant in all of it. So that was quite sad to see that. But you just get so deep into it all, and it's. There's so much about, the episodes themselves and productions and the season, but, the people behind them as well, and whether it's a director or a writer or the actors and stuff. And now I think, I could just keep waffling about it, but it's just unbelievable how much they put in it. And I can't think of any other show that would have an audience that would want, maybe Star Trek, I suppose, but to have this sort of stuff, and also to have this kind of stuff made in the first place. Like, Friends is good. I like Friends. I wouldn't watch endless documentaries about the writers and the set builders on it. Do you know what I mean? It's just not quite as interesting.
Not to you, maybe, but it would be to a Friends stan.
Yes, I suppose.
And that's the point, true, isn't it? They're appealing to a very particular demographic. These things are probably never going to be mass market. They're only produced in this
that's
form
why they're limited,
as limited editions, and then the sort of standard case release is a bit later on.
There's quite a lot of mythologizing. That's not the word. That's the one.
Go on. Oh, this is getting deep.
About Doctor Who. With we like the writers, and we know them, and the directors and stuff, and it probably is the same on other shows as well. But it just feels with Who that it's a lot kind of richer, and
there are many decades of content there, though, isn't it? There's a lot of coming up to 60 years of Doctor Who, and that's not just the TV show. That's everything that goes on around it. It is vast. It's huge.
And you've got different. You've got the Hinchcliffe era, and the Chibnall era, and whatever it might be. And Friends, for example. I don't know why I'm using Friends.
10 years of Friends. That's it.
That's it. There's not different eras within it. So, and Trek is probably the same. In some ways, you've got so many different shoys within that. So,
and now Star Wars is getting up there. I mean, Star Wars obviously had a massive mythology almost from the off, and it's just kind of
as
added to that with all the stuff. So that might have been a better analogy, possibly. Although actually, it's similar to Doctor Who in that respect, in that there's such a massive wealth of it, so it probably wouldn't have worked as a contrasting thing. But
it's just the Mandalorian.
That's all you do. You're missing out on so much other stuff, mate. Honestly,
am I?
Star Wars is my first love. You know that, right? We probably never had this discussion, and maybe this is not the place.
No, you've never said that. Why are we doing this podcast?
It is because Star Wars is, in my opinion, and I know I'm not alone, frankly amazing. There is lots of it. Well, Star Wars was my first kind of window into science fiction, particularly movie stuff.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
And when I was a kid in the 70s, everything was kind of dull and grey and violent, and there wasn't you find your joy where you can, basically, and you have to go hunt for it sometimes, and it was difficult, really. I don't really. It's only in retrospect I kind of think that, but I do remember going to the cinema and watching Star Wars, and when it was out, and there was all that mania about it, and I was soaking up as much of it as I could before it, because those the Des Escapes and the spaceships and the Death Star and Obi-Wan and Luke Skywalker and all of that stuff just got me really, really excited, and I'd never been into sci-fi before that. I'd watched maybe the odd space film. I think I might have seen Silent Running on BBC Two and not really understood it at that point, or something like that. And everything was just so grim and great. And I remember there was Grease and there was Star Wars, and both of those things were just so joyous. It just seemed to break everything. It broke the 70s open. And I remember when I got back home from watching Star Wars, right? And again, I'm only young, right? I'm literally 8 years old on this, right? And we got home, and my parents went off, my sister went off, and I was in the front room on my own, and I looked around cautiously to make sure I wasn't being watched, and then I just went, all that stuff. I was Luke Skywalker in the Millennium Falcon there, blasting the TIE fighters. So it was special. It's all been downhill from there. But do you know what? And looking at it now with all the content we've got, the Book of Boba Fett, the Mandalorian, like you said, we've got the Bad Batch, the Clone Wars, all of that. I absolutely love it all. If my 8-year-old self could see what Star Wars has become, well, he can. He's still me. He's still there in my head, watching all this stuff and eating his crisps and loving it. Because that's what it appeals to. It's and as we grow older, we get more interested in the actual making of the thing, and the cast and the crew, and how they did that, and how they did this and that and everything else, and all the little connections behind the scenes, and then between the different media as well, the extended universe type stuff. And Star Wars and Doctor Who literally sit side by side in my head. They're now kind of equal in terms of the wealth of content and mythology and history and futures, all of that stuff, and it's good fun to dive into.
Yeah, I think the MCU is probably my equivalent. I mean,
but again, the MCU is only it's quite a small corner of the entire Marvel. Of the Marvel's entirety,
that's
isn't
it?
it?
Yeah.
If you lumped all of Marvel's stuff, not just the MCU, then you've still got all that, all that content. It's all massive.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I used to read the comics when I was younger, and restarted again in 2004 or something. So I've been reading stuff again for a long time before the films were coming out. And so. I was OG, Marvel fan, but obviously the MCU has only been going for 13 odd years or whatever it is now. But that's something I always really loved. Then kind of came to fruition and on the screen.
Yeah.
And like you said, your 8-year-old self could never have anticipated what Star Wars would have become like today. And the same with the MCU. I never imagined that films that good would get made, and then that it would develop into what it is now with people, millions of other people kind of waking up to how good it all is, and there's probably an argument for all of it to be said. Maybe there's a bit much being made, and is there an MCU fatigue? Maybe. I think stuff goes in the bandwagon trundles along. Oh, we must hate it now. It's had its
That's a very cynical outlook on things, Geoff. I'm disappointed with you, mate.
Well, do you not see it online?
Well, I think in one respect there's a danger of it.
I don't think there's too much.
I don't. I think there potentially is a danger of it being diluted, but I don't think that has ever really happened. I think certain elements of it are stronger perhaps than others.
Yeah.
And if there's a fatigue, if you're talking about fatigue on the from the perspective of people, the audience, then there are probably going to be certain pockets of people who feel that way. And I think it's the same with Doctor Who, with Star Wars, Star Trek, and lots of other things like that. Yeah,
and I think that it happens, isn't it? Maybe you grow out of it a little bit, or your tastes change, or whatever. Personally,
But is that fatigue, or is that a kind of evolution of your own personalities? You kind of grow
I think
up
it's an
in
evolution.
The world,
I mean, people talk about MCU fatigue, superhero fatigue. Like Shazam just came out and it didn't do very well.
It's only been out a week, hasn't it?
Well, it's only it's
which is another thing, right? That these films are expected to break even within a day or two, right?
Well, and that's it, and that's
if they
why
don't, it's a complete failure, regardless of how strong
Yeah.
the story is and how much money's been poured into it, which is
and that
sad.
was one of the things about Avatar was that it ran and ran, and most MCU films, they have that massive opening weekend because you sort of been conditioned to you got to go see it early for the spoilers to avoid stuff, and Avatar didn't have spoilers per se, so it doesn't matter if I see it a month down the line, and so it's a lot of the big superhero stuff, they get that huge taking right up front. And then it sort of peters off, but no, I think I've seen articles about is there too much stuff to do people have fatigue and things, and well, for me personally, no, I don't agree with the sort of consensus that you might see online. Like we talked to Fraser Gregory yesterday, and what did he call it? RFW.
Yeah, received fan wisdom.
Received fan wisdom, and that is that at the moment, the MCU has lost it, and all of that, and I don't agree at all.
No.
But
I
think
moving on. It's just changing.
It's
changed.
The
stories are
that's
changing.
it. And people say, there's no direction in it. And sorry, listeners, we are way off track here. But,
we can take this bit out and put it in something else. Discussion about
maybe.
these kind of franchises.
They say there's no direction at the moment. Who's the baddie? It's Kang. What's the problem? It's the multiverse, obviously. But they forget that when Iron Man came out, we didn't have any overarching baddie. We didn't have anything until the end of the Avengers, and then you got a bit more through Phase 2, and then Phase 3. So I kind of view it like Phase 1, 2, 3 is like
that's a complete volume, isn't it?
That's it. And Phase 4, 5, 6, 7, I guess, is book 2, and so we're kind of starting again in some ways. We've introduced Shang-Chi, the Eternals, Miss Marvel, etc., and now all these things have been put into play, and they're going to come to fruition later on. And anyone who says, they haven't got a clue what they're doing, and they used to do. No, they actually didn't.
It's the same. It's the same argument that I see levelled at the DC films. And maybe in that case it's relatively founded. It doesn't feel like there's ever been a real sort of overarching direction for these films. They've all seemed to have been treated as individual units, individual properties in themselves, until you get to the Justice League films, the Snyderverse, which I know you love, obviously. But
it's great.
I think that's the only real time in the DC EU where there's actually been a plan from start to finish. But even before it got off the ground, it was hacked to bits by the studio. A lot of those films were just destroyed before they ever saw the light of day. And it's only when you get the kind of restored versions that you start to see how it was meant to play out.
And you see it with, Marvel. Obviously Kevin Feige is ultimately in charge of all of it and the decisions. And that was the problem really with DC, that there was no kind of plan. And Marvel, and they admit that when they did Iron Man, and they had the Nick Fury tease at the end. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we could do the Avengers one day? There was no kind of concrete plan.
There wasn't. Not at that
in
point.
In terms of We'll go along here, but we didn't know Thanos was going to be the thing. And, when they were filming the Avengers, it might have been the end of it if Captain America and Thor had flopped upon release. It would have just stopped it all dead. So they do have a plan, but I think people get so kind of... some people, I think, view each Marvel film as essentially a trailer or a setup for the next thing and the next thing. And if you don't get, immediate answers on things... Then there's frustration, and in this day and age of such quick, everything is on demand, and you can watch everything in a night if you want it, and again, sorry, but in Avatar, there's a couple of things left hanging over to the next film, and I remember seeing a few people pissed off online that they didn't get an answer for it, and
but they know it's the second in the trilogy at least, right?
Yeah,
and they know the third one
is
well into production.
Your third one's done, and it's it's been rendered and everything, but it doesn't end on a cliffhanger as such. But there's threads, it's like another chapter, and then there's bits that will carry on, and that's brilliant. I didn't want to know everything in that one film, and so it's nice to have that hang on. But I think, and I'm not saying everyone's like this, of course, but I think people kind of, you want answers immediately, and I think we get so used to just instant gratification that
maybe.
If there's not an explanation straight away, but I think, for me personally, no, I don't think the MCU has lost it. I mean, maybe there's some stuff that like we don't need, like Echo, for example, because I don't know the Echo character, but that's not to say there isn't an audience for it. And in terms of, the representation that the character provides, it's brilliant. So it may not, like immediately appeal to me as like, oh my God, they're making a show of someone I love. It doesn't mean I'm not going to watch it and end up enjoying it. It's a bit like, I didn't really know the Miss Marvel character. I never read the comics. I've seen her in, stuff she cameos in. But I watched it because it's my duty. But she's really cool, and I
enjoyed
it.
that one. I thought it was a good one. Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see her team up with Captain Marvel and stuff. But I remember Stan Lee saying years ago that the comics are designed, and there's a Fast show, a similarity here, which we'll come to in a sec. But he said, you might read The Howling Commandos, Nick Fury and The Howling Commandos, if you like war. Or you might read Werewolf by Night if you like horror. And there's something for everyone. Yeah. And, it applies to the films and stuff. Werewolf by Night was an excellent horror homage. It's not for everyone, just the same as, Loki isn't for everyone. And I don't know whether people sort of think you have to like all of it, or have to enjoy it. And you just...
You find what works for you, don't you? I think
you do. And I like all of it, but I much loved Hawkeye over Loki, because I really like those two, and Hawkeye became, he was always good.
Hawkeye was much better than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, far better than it had
phenomenal.
Any right to be.
Really, really good.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think Renault is probably out of action now for a while, but hopefully we'll see, Haley Steinfeld again. But the Fast show thing, and this always pops in my head. But they said, if you don't like one skit, wait a minute, there'll be another one.
A minute.
And I just kind of think, well, maybe you didn't like Captain America and the Winter Soldier, but there's another show that you like, and you have to kind of look at it like that they're connected, but they are standalone as well. And you're not obligated to like it all. Anyway, let's get back to the topic.
Yes, and welcome to the bonus edition of Marvel Corner, MCU Corner to Corner, our other podcast.
And I would like to say that I would think that most people listening probably most people listening probably have an interest in the MCU and stuff. So
or Star Wars,
please,
Star Trek, James Bond, any of that kind of stuff. We love it.
Please forgive us that.
Right, so at 23 minutes in, should we talk about Day of the Daleks?
Let's
do the title of this particular show, yeah?
Let's call this episode Collection MCU Daleks. So, Paul, why particularly are we looking at Day of the Daleks?
There's a few reasons, isn't there? Yes. Way back in the mists of time.
Come on, Wayne.
What was that?
Does anyone know that? Come on, Wayne. Do you not remember that from Wayne's World?
No.
When they do the dream and they go...
I've seen it once and I thought never in life again. So.
Oh dear. Okay.
It's a bit embarrassing. Anyways, yes, Day of the Daleks. Well, do you know what, right? Obviously, Season 9 is out, so we thought let's do something topical because then everybody can watch this. But I think also, but really, I mean, for me personally, it's a very, very special story. Now, again, I'm going to go wibbly wobbly, like you said. Come on, Wayne, back to 1980. I'd already read a whole bunch of Target Doctor Who novels from my local library. But I'd never read Day of the Daleks. Didn't even know it existed. It wasn't like I had an episode guide of every Doctor Who story or anything like that. It was literally just see what books they have in a library and then bring them home, consume, read them, and then whack them back. But on one rainy day, when my family and I were travelling across the breadth of the country from one end to another, and in the back of our orange Volvo 740 diesel from the 70s with a little tree hanging, a little one of those air freshener things.
Well,
It might not have been a tree, actually. It might be one of those even worse ones where they have 3 little orange dots. Or anyway, I digress. But me and my sister are fighting each other in the back of the Volvo, and my dad pulls into a garage, and he comes back with a book for my sister, and he comes back with a book for me, and it is dun, 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 it is actually that very book from 1980. So this is actually the very first Doctor Who Target novel that I owned. So it is very special. And you know what? Later on, once I started having loads of these and had my own collection, so I didn't need to go to the library anymore, I started numbering them. And there it is, number 1. And it's funny because we were talking to, like you said, to Fraser, our friend yesterday, about being a Doctor Who fan. And we talked about, doing that. Right, listing all the ones that you've got. Like, what was that say? Got, haven't got or read. So I've either read it or I own it, and they've all got numbers.
Do you remember doing that with like stickers and trading?
Oh, totally.
Cards? My boy was getting
need. Yeah. That's it.
And my boy was getting Super Mario cards recently, and he wanted someone at school to have some so he could trade. And I said, well, if you find anyone, you go through, you got, need, and he was like, what? he didn't.
I don't get it. What are you on about? I don't understand.
I used to spend hours doing that in the playground.
It's part of the fun of it, though, isn't it? We love all that stuff.
I was disappointed that he didn't get the opportunity to do that, actually, to be honest. And we completed his set by the Panini mail order thing.
That's cheating. I've never done that in life, which means I don't have a completed set because I'm it always gets to the end where you've just got a few to go and there's no chance of finding them. The odds are just totally against you, so you have to do the mail order.
I said, you know what? I'd rather pay for the specific ones we need
than just buy endless bags of tickets and have the disappointment that you've got them all.
That's it. The more you buy, the more cards you get, of course, and then the less chance you get of having one that you actually need.
Exactly. So, it's a self-defeating exercise, but it's fun. Yes. Anyway, nonetheless. What I did as well, actually, I remember a lot of these things. I actually bought another sticker album or two. So once you've nearly completed one, you're probably halfway through completing another one as well. So to get all your duplicates gone. So that was just obsessive, So anyways, back to Day of the Daleks. We are going to get there in the end, I promise you. Yes, it is a very special one because wherever we were going, and I can't remember, I just remember being in a caravan somewhere and it was raining, and this was literally the only book I had, and I just read it, and I finished reading it, I think, before we'd even got there, because they're only little, these things, and when we got to where we were going, I think I read it again. And possibly again when I got home. It was the most read Doctor Who book. And when I read it, I thought it's actually the best Doctor Who adventure that I've ever read, ever. And I'd read a lot before this. A lot of the Target novels that were out in the 70s, I'd read most of them. And then it got round to this one. I thought, well, this is just amazing. I just love it. And it's such a good story. I mean, for the one thing, it's got it's a Dalek story. Obviously, it's the first Dalek story that viewers in the 70s would have seen since Evil of the Daleks, which is actually quite an early Pat Troughton story, the second Doctor story. So you've when was that? 66, I think, 66 or 67, and Day of the Daleks is 1972. So was that 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 years between them, which for someone who's 10-year-old at the time, they might never have seen the Daleks before then. That's all. This could be their very first Dalek story, and I know Barry Letts and Terrance Dicks wanted it to be really special, So and I think they already had a story by Lewis Marks, which is about people from the future kind of coming back in time to prevent a thing happening, and that stuff, and then they asked him to incorporate Daleks in it, and then they forgot to ask Terry Nation, so then they had to go back and ask Terry Nation, even though they'd already asked Lewis Marks to write the Daleks into it. And apparently the story goes, I was listening to Barry Letts and
if he'd said no?
Well, no, this is the thing. Hold on, right? Because Terry Nation apparently, right? This is Barry Letts' words. I'm paraphrasing, but Barry Letts says, we went round to Terry's grand house because he was a millionaire by then. Told him the plan, gave him a sort of summary of the story, told him that Daleks were going to be featured, and he's like, "Yes, dear boy, yes, go ahead, no problem at all. Just sort it out with my agent." And then he cracks open a bottle of champagne. They all have get very merry and all the rest of it, and then the agent's on the phone. And he's literally fleecing the BBC, to pay through the nose to be able to use the Daleks. And so the story is that Terry's fine. It's the agent who's an absolute Rottweiler, I think, in Terrence Dix's words.
That doesn't surprise me. Isn't it funny that the villain that Doctor Who relies on so heavily and is so identified with isn't actually owned by Doctor Who, and they have to license it out. It's like it's like Marvel saying, "Oh yeah, we want to do a film with the Green Goblin now," but
but the Green Goblin's owned by somebody else.
Yeah, I mean they sort of do have rights issues actually, but it's all still a Marvel.
Do you know what? It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because these discussions and debates are always going on. Is it the property of the creator or the company that owns the products that enable the creator to create the thing that they create?
It's like with Marvel, with the comics, they own it, and my understanding is the writers of that character, the creator, will get a small residual every time a character is used or in a film, because some of the creators of like. Cable or in Deadpool or something have sort of bemoaned that they only got a couple of grand offered to them, and maybe that's what the deal was. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get millions for it, but it is an interesting one, and I would have thought if like what's the situation with the Ood? We know that Russell T Davies created the Ood, but was he responsible for the look of it, much like Stan Lee created Spidey, but Ditko, I think, wasn't it, designed the look of him, and Walt Disney developed Mickey Mouse, but iWorks drew him, and there's always been, well, who created these characters and who owns it, and I think kind of creating the persona of the character and then the look, it goes together.
It's a combination. Or, staying on topic, we have Terry Nation, who wrote the Daleks, and Raymond Cusick, who designed the Daleks back in '60. Terry Nation was a freelancer. Cusick was a BBC employee. So anything he designed was automatically owned by the BBC. Yeah. So I think technically the BBC own or have the design of the Daleks, but it's equal to the way they were written, So Cusick designed them to Terry Nation's description, and obviously Terry gave them voice and everything else, but they were realised by a whole, by Ray and a whole team of people who then, and again, I think they freelanced or outsourced the build of the Daleks to another company. Was it Shawcraft or someone like that?
Yeah, I think maybe.
So again, they're designing to a brief, and it's just it's all messy, isn't it? I think with as well as I do, Geoff, because both of us do create stuff, right, for different clients and things. And you have those agreements. We know now to have those agreements rock solid in place before you even start, because later down the line, there's you want to avoid any potential problems. You want to avoid the creator saying, "Yes, dear boy, it's fine, no problem. Go ahead and use them," and then you get a middleman coming in and saying, "Yeah, about that." Now obviously no problem to use them, but they are our property. We've got a lot of invested stuff going on in here, and we need to be recompensed appropriately, which is great. To be fair to Terry Nation, because he was one of very few people in that day and age actually able to to get to actually get rich off something that he had created. So and it's not just the design. To be fair, I think it is the single nature of the Daleks.
You're right. Well, it all goes together. You could design it, and it looks like the pepper pot and blah blah blah. But if you then had it going around, going, "Hello, darling, it's not quite the same.
No,
is it?
and
It's
this
not
is another
like,
part of it as well, because I think Terry and his agents were very protective. I think this Terry Nation's estate now, who obviously own the Daleks' rights today, they're quite protective of how the Daleks are used in other media. And I remember there was a Spike Milligan sketch where he basically does do that. Comes in dressed as a really crappy Dalek, and it kind of is like making the tea and bumbling around the sofa in the living room. And I seem to recall, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I do seem to recall that either Terry Nation or the estate, if you like, got really quite arsey with this and say, well, that's not a good portrayal of the Daleks. Yes, it's a bit of fun. But I think he was involved in trying to sell them to the United States and try and get something off the ground then. And then he got the BBC literally just treating them like something out of, literally a poor comedy sketch just for lols, So you can understand on the one hand why he did that. And I totally respect the fact that he was able to, to get something out of it. What I don't like is the fact that, on the other hand, Raymond Cusick, who is responsible for the look of these things, got naff all 50 quid, I think, or whatever, and a lifetime of kind of resentment of always been, looking at Terry Nation in his mansion, and he's just doing what he does, and there's Daleks everywhere, and he got nothing out of that.
And because you could argue that well, it's not even an argument, really, is it? Terry Nation may have designed the persona and character of the Daleks, but their look, designed, by Raymond is that's the thing that became identifiable, as well as of course
the silhouette,
the silhouette, and if someone else had designed it and it looked different, would it have caught on the same way? Maybe
Indeed.
not. You'll never know. So it feels wrong to not have compensated him properly,
paid him
and to
properly.
To have paid, that's what compensate means. Doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, they're usually in arrears compensation, isn't it? Something you should have had.
It? Well, he should have had it.
Then it will be compensation or recompense. Anyway, can we get back to the story, because we haven't even opened it yet? So so look, I guess we may well talk about spoilers in this, actually, or we may well talk about plot points that are a little bit spoilery. So might be best if you want to watch the thing and then come back and then listen to us, if you like, providing we are actually still talking about Day of the Daleks at that point, and not about Marvel, Avatar, Star Trek, or whatever.
You could go and watch it and come back.
Go watch
and
it
leave
now
us running, and we won't be on it yet.
Oh dear! But do you know? Okay. So I've already said I love this story, and it's the first Dalek story since Evil of the Daleks, quite a few years before, and it's actually not written by Terry Nation either. And again, actually, Terry Nation hadn't written a Dalek story since the first Doctor, and I think it would have been the Daleks Master Plan, which again was a collaboration with Dennis Spooner, I think, they were sort of writing alternate episodes. So Terry Nation, he's living in his mansion and he hasn't done Daleks for a while. He's actually focused on selling into America. I think he's writing for things like the Avengers and all sorts of other bits and the series around the place. So this is written by by a guy called Louis Marks, don't know which. But again, Louis Marks has only written one previous story for Doctor Who, which was Planet of Giants on the season 2 collection, which was chopped horribly from 4 episodes into 3 episodes and makes very little sense, to be honest, but is nonetheless a lot of fun. So this is in my opinion, a really rich story which has an awful lot going on to it. And which has a lot of room to breathe. It's also quite a dynamic story. It moves very, very quickly, and it sets up. It starts out as one thing and very quickly becomes something else, and then becomes something else again towards the end. So it starts out as a ghost story, right? So there's, we have a ticking grandfather clock in a stately home,
mansion,
orderly house, or I think it's something different in the novel. Actually, I think it's Osterley House. It is Osterley House, and they do provide a map in there. There's actually wonderful illustrations in the book, which I really love. There you go. There's a Dalek and the controller from 22nd Century Earth. And so it starts off as a ghost story. You got a politician guy who's trying to stave off World War III. Tensions are rising high, which is something we can all kind of relate to just now, to be honest. And the future of the world seems to hang on the success of a peace conference, which Sir Reginald, who lives at this house, is expected to chair or have some kind of magic negotiation deal, which is going to hopefully bring everybody together. But that's in jeopardy because on the night that we're introduced to the story, he's working late at home. Somebody breaks in, points a gun at his head, and just before he can shoot, disappears in a haze of special effects, wondrous magic, and it's that in itself, you think, well, so what? But of course, because he's such an important figure, and because there's a potential supernatural or weird, unexplained element, units are called in to kind of head things up. But the Brigadier's got his handful managing security for the peace conference and everything else. And it starts it starts relatively mildly it's there's a lot of atmosphere in that opening scene with the sort of darkness and the clock ticking, and it's the usual kind of Reginald Stiles' office is a wonderful piece of BBC period set dressing. It's beautiful, massive mahogany desk, tapestry, wall hangings, candelabra, all sorts of stuff, low level lighting, and then in comes this this dude wearing a sort of army outfit, a camo, a guerrilla outfit, and he points his space gun at Sir Reginald's head. And when the Doctor comes in, of course, the Doctor doesn't believe in ghosts. He suspects there's something much more sinister going on here. Indeed. Do I need to describe the rest of the story? I should just hold it there.
Well, we could talk about it. I remember when I watched it. I was yeah, you're right. It starts off as one thing, and then suddenly sort of this twist happens, isn't it?
Well, we had that sort of prefigured as well, because and this is why another reason I love Day of the Daleks, because it's one of the very few stories, at least of the classic series, that actually has some kind of time bending.
Yeah, that's what I was
conceit
say, yeah.
At its core.
Yeah.
The plot hangs on that whole sort of paradox of the often posed question of, well, if you go back in time to murder your grandparents, are you and then you're obviously not born, so how can you go back in time and murder your grandparents? But obviously if you didn't go back in time and murder your grandparents would be alive, and so would you, giving you chance to go back in time and murder your grandparents. But if you murder your grandparents, and so on and so on. So it's that paradox.
Does it change the timeline if you do? Because I suppose we could talk about it, couldn't we? Because they're trying to stave off World War III, aren't they? And then yes, they are, because that leaves the Earth vulnerable. I think it's described as 100 years of fighting, followed by years and years of people living like animals in holes of the ground, like 9/8, I think something quite specific like that. 9/8 of the population destroyed on Earth, leaving it wide open for Daleks to kind of come in and invade. That's it. And the paradox is that the trigger, of the explosion that led to World War III was caused by the 22nd century people coming back to try to stop it, and so it's a loop that just keeps on going. And you're right. It's one of the few classics, and also we've talked about this a bit before. They don't do it an enormous amount, even in
no, that's right.
But to kind of make a feature of the actual.
And when
time
they do,
element.
Stephen Moffat did quite a lot of them, but I think he kind of cheats us a little bit in a lot of those. Putting it mildly,
you might get.
Whereas this one doesn't cheat at all. The logic in it is really tight, and you can pull apart the paradox, but that's just because it's a paradox. If you I think as Terence Dix described it, if you think about it too hard, your head will explode. But nonetheless, the working out of it and the way it plays through the story and the way it gives us actually quite an exciting, dynamic story, at least in paper form, is really quite tremendous.
I really enjoy the episode, and I think maybe I read that John and Katie kind of felt that it wasn't as epic as it could have been. It's only got a handful of Daleks.
I think it's literally three
screen,
Daleks,
isn't it? And they felt that it should have had more, but I enjoyed it. I like the Ogrons a lot, and
love the Ogrons.
When we were saying earlier before we started recording, when we tweeted about doing this episode, Gruntley the Ogron, everyone's favourite Twitter Ogron, came out. He must have Ogron up as a.
Explain, Geoff, who this is. We might have listeners who don't engage with Twitter.
Gruntly the Ogron is an Ogron named Gruntly,
and works for Davros
tweets,
somewhere in space.
Yeah, works
and time.
for Davros. Tweets daily about his adventures and his frustrations,
bananas,
and his bananas and his hopes and dreams and stuff. And whoever is Gruntly, obviously he really is Gruntly, but it's brilliant.
We love you, Gruntly.
Some really great Photoshop stuff. And
what do you mean Photoshop?
Really
it's real. Behave yourself.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, Gruntly. And, there's no controlling people sometimes.
Sorry,
Gruntly. I do apologise on behalf of my co-host for questioning the credibility of your images from wherever it is in space and time you dwell.
Yeah. He always replies in character. He's really good. So check him out. What is it? Is he just Gruntly the Ogron?
Something like that. Yeah, you can find it.
If you
there is an Ogron. Now, do you know what? Actually, again, right, because that image, which is, it looks like, I think it's a bit of a photo on there. So it's part photo, part sort of illustration, in sort of 70s kind of design styly. I think it's a Chris Achilleos picture, but anyway, no, I digress. But again, I'd never seen Ogrons before in Doctor Who at all, right? Because
I've just looked him up. He's at Ogron.
There you go. That's it, right? So I'd never seen because I didn't watch much Doctor Who, as we said. I caught the occasional bit, and there was never any Ogrons on there. But the whole design of that just really got my imagination going, and I love that space gun as well. It's quite solid. It's quite brutal, and I just love it. And it was a long time until I actually got round to watching Day of the Daleks in reality. And I got to admit, when I did, I think the level of sort of interest went from up here, because obviously so much emotional attachment to the book, to down there, because there is no question that the production is seriously challenged. It's quite an ambitious story, and I think watching it again, you can see how well they do with what they have and what they don't have. But it seems to, on the one hand, it gives us some really good directorial flourishes, right? I think Paul Bernard, the director, hadn't really done an awful lot before Day of the Daleks. But there's a lot of zooms, right? A lot of unrequired zooms or unnecessary zooms. But they add drama. And to be honest, if they weren't there, it would be relatively flat. It's, the sets from 22nd century Earth, I think, are fantastic. They're kind of what we thought the future might be a bit like. There's a continuity of design. If you look at something like the Seeds of Death and the Ice Warriors, where it's a very sort of 60s idea of the future, it's very similar in this one. Lots of curved lines, sort of space furniture, slightly oddball looking things, doors that kind of lift up on bits of string, but are clearly powered by some other energy, clearly, not just a bloke pulling on a wire with a fag hanging out of his mouth or something like that. But there is
get on with it.
But there's a lot of effort gone into it, into those future sets, if you like. But it's just on occasion things fall a little bit flat, and probably one of the most disappointing parts of it for me is the battle at the end when the Daleks invade, and it's. I sound like I'm kind of really going at it now, but it has to be addressed, right? I do love the story, mate. I'm just not too sure about the actual TV part of it, but it's and this is the problem where you consume the novels, right, before you see or read the novels before you see the TV.
You mean read?
Because obviously in a novel, everything takes place on an unlimited stage. And then you see it in a tiny little TV screen, or even on a giant TV screen now in super, in high definition, where you can see every single fingerprint on a shiny surface, where you can see that the backdrop of trees behind the French windows in Audley House is actually a painting.
It's a rippling curtain, yeah. Do you know, I used to read a lot of, the adaptation of the smash hit movie, film tie-in novels.
Yeah.
And when I was not old enough to go and see them, I remember buying True Lies and various other things. And often those would get written based off the script.
Rather than because they're launched at the same time as the film, near enough, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
And they've got to have time to be written.
Yeah, and occasionally, there'd be bits in them that, they'd been cut from the film. But there was something, I can't remember what it was, maybe I read about it in Empire magazine or something, but it was quite sort of famous example of the book being almost completely different from the film in the end, because it was written so much, in advance of,
Well, I think Star Wars has a bit of that as well, actually. The novel of Star Wars has a couple of few scenes at the beginning, which were cut out of the original theatrical release.
There is a probably is a book, but I know Marvel fairly recently released, a comic of the original script where it was Luke Starkiller, and and there was differences. I think maybe Han Solo was different in it or something. So they did an adaptation of the very original script, before things changed for it. Yeah, but yeah, when you read the book first, and which probably a lot of people did for old Who before they were able to watch it all again. Yeah, you get an idea in your head, don't you?
You do.
In your own visuals.
But I think, as we've said before, you can't be a Doctor Who fan and let those things kind of get in the way.
Well, that's
it's just there is that initial, but with this one, I do recall that initial sort of disappointment that it wasn't, and I should have known, because it is Doctor Who, and it's always been. It's always been like that. And what you've got to do is kind of look at what they actually do give you. And what they give you in this story is scene after scene of action, and actually even in the quieter scenes where there's a lot of exposition. One of the great things about the Third Doctor stories is that Pertwee gets his moments of charm, if you like, especially with Jo Grant, played by the wonderful, brilliant, lovely Katie Manning. And there's always there seems, by this stage in the Third Doctor's kind of era, we seem to get quite a lot of these moments where they're tied up together in a jail cell or something, and they bond brilliantly. And and there's some wonderful. There's at least 2 scenes in here where they do that. But do you know what? The story keeps pace, even though things kind of on paper would look like they slow down. And just, there's a lot of talking about what's going on right now, what the Doctor thinks is happening. Joe's asking loads of questions, which are on behalf of the audience. Well, what now, Doctor? What should we do? Well, who are they, Doctor? What do they want? And the Doctor's kind of explaining what he thinks it all is. But they pull it off brilliantly. It never seems to really slow. And then we go back to a kind of, action scenes. We've got one thing running through this, actually, I have to say, is the 22nd century controller. So the guy who's kind of in charge of all the all the good stuff, is in charge of people and production and all kinds of things, and on behalf of the Daleks, so the controller, played by Aubrey Woods, I think. I'm just looking down.
I'm just going to bring up a tweet here. We've got some tweets to come to in a minute. But Lord Steerforth, who's at Lord_Steerforth, said it's a great story, and Aubrey Woods is particularly wonderful as a controller.
Yeah.
He says he gives the role his all, as if he's doing Shakespeare. And I loved Anna Barry as the gorilla leader.
She's fantastic. Yeah, and that's another good thing about this. You got some really good characters. But what I would say about Aubrey Woods is, and again, this isn't a criticism, it's more of an observation and more reflection of the times in which these things were made. But his performance, whilst good and believable, I mean, he absolutely inhabits it, is suited to stage acting, I think, rather than film or TV. It's not a very, it's more of a stylized performance, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because actually that continues right through Doctor Who, well into the 80s, and arguably into some of the modern day stuff even.
Well, and that's quite interesting, because particularly early, first, second Doctor Who was very kind of theatrical in the way it was,
because that's what TV was at the time, wasn't it?
It was, and
the background of a lot of the directors is from stage straight into the BBC,
and the actors as well. And you can see it in the performances that it's very. It's really kind of heightened and playing for the back of the the venue kind of thing, and that change and in style, develops over the decades and stuff. So yeah, he's quite over, quite big,
just a little bit. Yeah. So we end up with Joe and the Doctor kind of transported one after the other into 22nd century Earth as the story plays out, and we start to see more of that. Obviously, we see that the Daleks are in control of the whole thing. We get a bit of story from Aubrey Woods' character as he's explaining the history of it, the years, the century of warfare and the horrors that kind of followed, leaving things, we get all that. So there's a really nice sense of world building outside the sets. And again, this is something that really comes through in the novel and perhaps helped me really engage with it. I think Terrance Dicks really sort of latched onto it. The first chapter in the book, actually, it doesn't appear on screen at all. It's Moni, one of the gorillas, sort of waking up in his dormitory to the sounds of people having nightmares and just going through the motions of which describe the true horror of living in 22nd century Earth, and it gives reason for the gorillas fighting to do what they do. Because one thing the Doctor mentions in the story, TV and in the book, is is the fact that actually going back in time to do this is a fanatical thing to do. It's desperation, and again with the gorillas are explaining to the Doctor at some point they've literally tried everything else and it hasn't worked. You can't beat the Daleks. They are a tremendous, unstoppable force. Even if there are only 4 of them, that would say. But and it's that idea of this kind of wall of a wall-like, immovable alien empire that has dominated everybody, that dominates everybody's lives, even the controllers, because he's as much a slave as anybody else. And it's that kind of build-up of the power that the Daleks have, and the fact that it drives people to steal a bit of time technology from them and go back in time and create that paradox. It's not, it's not a thing that you do. When you wake up, think, I'm just going to go back in time and kill my granddad, or stop Hitler or whatever. It's driven by, this is the last thing. This is the only thing now that we can think of. We can't fight the Daleks. We have to stop things happening before they even got to that stage. And I think actually, that is it's present within the narrative of this story. It's not necessarily deep. It doesn't go too detailed, too deep into the horrors of that. But it might do in the book a little bit more. But nonetheless, it's kind of we're told about it and we can believe it. And the great thing about this story particularly is everything within it sort of makes sense. Actually makes sense. There's a brilliant logic from the beginning of the story to the end of it. And this is one of the reasons why I think I read it so many times in Geoff, because the actual storytelling craft is tremendous. It is a brilliant example of classic Who storytelling, and its absolute best, I think. So,
yeah, it's a great episode. I'm looking forward to watching it again. I loved it hugely. I really like Third Doctor Pertwee stuff. He's so cool.
He's so cool. Yeah,
he is cool. And he's a bit more kind of actiony, and even though it's all kind of largely set on Earth, it didn't sort of detract or spoil.
Well, because it's a future Earth as well, isn't it? So you've got
I mean his era.
Oh, okay.
In general, and I think it's powered by his charisma and also him and Joe.
Totally.
They're so good together. I'd love to get Katie on for a chat one day.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of tweets from other fans here that I'd like to read through. So Mrs. Brenner, who's at Mrs. Brenner, I love it when people's name is the same as their username and there's no underscores around. One of my all-time favourites, love watching it, especially the redone version on DVD years ago, so to have this on Blu-ray will be fantastic. Ian O. Time Lord said, I think it's my favourite Pertwee story. He says, have you read the novel? It's even better. The illustrations are really good. So
yes, I have read the novel. No, it is really good. It's fantastic, and I would recommend it to anybody. If you haven't read the novel, in whichever cover you like,
I haven't.
Read
Do you
it.
send me one?
You know, it's a brilliant experience. You can watch the TV version, you know, the original, the OG, if you like, but still read the book anyway, because there's a lot of stuff in the book as well as illustrations, which just opens that whole world and explores it. And you know, it's astonishingly good. Really, one of the best classic stories, I think.
Chrissy Boy 2702, who's at Chrissy_boy 2702, just simply says my doctor. Ken Holtzhauser, who's at Dr. Von Wer,
I like that.
W-E-R,
Yeah, Dr. Von Wer
says I vividly remember watching this one for the first time in the 80s and being blown away, easily Pertwee's best Dalek story. And then Ken has shared some of his fantastic illustrations. I'm just looking at them now, actually. They are really good. It's John, Katie, and the Brigadier as well. The Eternal Feline, who's at who_EU16, says well-made, gritty vision of the future.
It is quite gritty. Yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah,
definitely.
I remember it. Yeah, it's quite bleak. Yeah, the Controller, played by Aubrey Woods, bears an uncanny resemblance to one future British PM, David Cameron.
Yes,
very
he does.
Appropriate.
He's right. Absolutely. Yeah, I can see it now. Yes.
Very appropriate, considering the themes throughout.
Definitely.
An
Very much
excellent
so,
political thriller and some very good filming and characters. Loudmouth Lordy, who's at Cranky Crip Crow 1, I've probably said that wrong, said the first solo Pertwee story I watched in 1990 and still a favourite. I like this one from John Porter, who's at JS Porter 1966. It's as warm and comforting as a large cup of hot chocolate before bed on a cold night.
That's brilliant. Do you know what? Actually, talking about that, it just reminded me of a really brilliant scene. And this is another reason I love the Pertwee era so much. We see lots of different sides of the Doctor's character. And in episode 1 of this, when we're still in sort of ghost story mode, and Joe and the Doctor have to stay overnight with the Doctor pretending to be Reginald Styles, and he just helps himself to some cheese and some wine, and then sits on the comfy chair, got his cheese, drinking his wine, and he's just like, you know, the kind of the old boy with his comforts. You know, just enjoying this, and he's giving comment on the wine. Was it? It's slightly no, not as cynical, a civilized wine. He kind of describes the wine in terms of moods, you know, and attitudes rather than flavors and stuff, which I love. I can't remember it completely, good, but it's you know, it's fantastic. I mean, I love John Pertwee's Doctor, and this is a really good showcase for him. And the first one of the season as well, so it's always got, I think the first story of any season has got a real energy to it. You know, it's like you know, we're setting out here's a brand new season, we're back, and we've got Daleks, and we've got explosions, and you know, we got Ogrons
really
and things.
Kicks it off,
and I think what's important with this season particularly is that we start to see the Doctor getting more distant from the Earthbound story. So we had Colony in Space the previous season in Series 8, where the Doctor and Joe encountered the Master, because I think the Master was in every story in that season. So, but the Time Lords took them away, spirited the TARDIS away with Joe and the Doctor inside it, and deposited them on this planet where there's a future colony. But that was the first time since Troughton's era that we've been back in space. But this year we do it a bit more. So in Day of the Daleks we go to future 22nd century Earth. Then we've got the Curse of Peladon, which I think comes next, where the Time Lords send the Doctor to Peladon and meet the Ice Warriors and Alpha Centauri. We've also got the mutants in there as well. So again, that's all in a future Earth empire, which is brilliant. You know, I love the mutants. We've got the Time Monster right at the end, which sends the Doctor and Joe back in time to Atlantis, and you know, deal with some kind of weird time entity, the Chronivore. So you know, we're really starting to see the Third Doctor's universe kind of open up in this season. And I think the Day of the Daleks is on the one hand quite familiar, because we've got the unit family is still there. They're you know, we recognise them from all the Pertwee stories before. That's great. They're all still there. Benton's got more to do. The Brigadier is just loving every, you know, Nick Courtney's loving every scene that he's in, and is, you know, it is putting all the stress and all the anxiety and these little comedic sort of quirks that he's got as well. It's all there. Mike Yates is there. There's some nice interplay with those guys. But then we've got quite an adventurous story that plays with time, that takes it to future Earth, that has a political element to it, which was as relevant in the 70s as it is again now. So it's a lot of things all tied up. And Daleks, as we've said. So if you haven't watched it yet, go out and see it. I would give this a resounding 1 million out of 1 million. That's my rating. I love it.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's a cracker. I just want to read one more tweet from Gary Pryke. I hopefully got that right. The Banzai Kid, anyway. One of the first Who videos I owned back in the wilderness years. I loved it, though it was one of the weird releases, complete and unedited, which basically meant that they left in all the bits where people fluff their lines. That sounds.
There are some little weird bits actually. One thing I've noticed on it is the is when the episodes reprise. So when episode 2 kicks in, and you get the last couple of minutes of episode 1. So you see the end of episode 1 play out, the start of episode 2, and then you get the sting from the music coming in at the same point where it came in at the end of episode 1. And then it sort of fades as the action continues, and I think it does that in episode 3 or 4 as well. At least one, if not both, of the other episodes. So, but that's kind of part of the fun of it. The sort of idiosyncrasies of the editing or the vision mixing, in that.
Yeah, they got left in. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm very much looking forward to watching this one again. Maybe I might get a chance over the weekend or something. But,
do it! Come on, Geoff. Be strong.
If you're listening. If you haven't watched it yet, let us know what you think when you do, or if you have watched it before, let us know what you think.
Would you give it 1 million out of 1 million? Let us know.
Yeah. Would you?
Why wouldn't you?
999. Why wouldn't you?
Classic Doctor Who. We even get a weird kind of timey-wimey thing where we got the doppelganger, we got Joe and the Doctor at the start messing around with the TARDIS time circuit thing, and then they see themselves in a yellow doorway. Now, this is a bit weird, actually, because the TARDIS console is outside of the TARDIS, except in the book it's still in the TARDIS and they're in the lab, but it's all a bit weird. It's one. Another great thing about the Third Doctor's era is the TARDIS. It's never the same, from one story to the next. It rarely appears. We rarely see the inside of it anyway. But when we do, it's always very different. And it's at least this occasion here. And in a couple of years ago, there was Inferno, where the console is outside of the TARDIS. It's in a shed in a garage, a workshop garage in Inferno. And here it's in the Doctor's unit lab. But the unit lab doesn't look like the unit lab we saw in the previous series, or actually any of the other stories in this series either. Right. So, it's weird things like that, but it doesn't detract from the story. In some way, it kind of just adds to the
you wonder what's gone on between episodes that, ended
and the
up
fact
like
that Doctor and Joe, the doppelganger Doctor and Joe, kind of framed in a yellow arch, and it's a solid yellow colour, is purely because they used yellow as their chroma key, their green screen, right? It was yellow because that was the colour they settled on. And to avoid all the fuzzy edges, they thought, we'll just have them against an actual yellow background. So you don't see where the edges of their heads meet the yellow from the background they were filmed against. There's no reason in life that this doorway in the Doctor's lab should be bright yellow. It just is. And you just accept it because it's timey-wimey. I shouldn't use that. I hate that bloody word. I find myself using it now. It wasn't even a thing in 1972. Hey, we never had timey-wimey in my day, Geoff. Cool, no, blimey. All we had was Joe Grant and the Doctor and the dematerialisation circuit. It looked like a little tripod on wheels. Yeah. Looked like a kind of toy that you sort of set it going and it bounces around the place. No?
And that's it, yeah.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. Just cut that.
I'll cut that. Right, well, on that note... I hope you've enjoyed our venture into the Marvel Universe and
Daleks. We got to the Daleks in the end.
And Daleks. We got there in the end.
It was just me kind of ranting off about them, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, it's good. Well, thanks for listening.
It's been fun.
We'll catch you next time on Who Corner to Corner.
Enjoy. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.